Learned to play an instrument. Learned a second language. Applied to college. Applied for a loan. Started a business. Started a blog. Shared a picture. Shared a moment. Turn your wish list into a checklist with Internet Essentials from Comcast. When you're connected, you're ready for anything.
Hello, I'm Ivan Weiner, Executive Director of the Albuquerque Film and Music Experience. Welcome to AFMX 2020, the virtual edition. As COVID-19 impacted so many festivals around the world, we are very fortunate and happy to be able to present an incredible program, thanks to our sponsors and our volunteers. Because of them, we're able to continue our tradition of bringing together filmmakers, musicians, students, and an entire community to share stories and collaborate into the future. This year we have 73 incredible film projects, with filmmakers doing live Q&As after their screenings. We also have our Intimate Conversation series that we'll be offering for free through Facebook Live. Please go to our website, abqfilmx.com, get your tickets for all of the events, see where you need to go for the free ones, and share with all of your friends on social media. It's going to be a week to remember. You can also make a small contribution through the ticketing pages for any of the events to the AFME Foundation. Finally, I'd like to thank our core team of staff members and volunteers who have worked so hard to bring the virtual experience to life. Kira, Ariella, Carly, Cindy, Shane, Sabrina, Barbara, Jerry, Sean, and Sam, this fest is for you. And it's for all of the volunteers who have contributed over the past 8 years of AFMX. From all of us at the Albuquerque Film and Music Experience, thank you. Now, let's fest.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Albuquerque Film and Music Experience's Intimate Conversation with Mr. Joshua Michael Stern. Josh, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Excited about this. A lot to get into. Got a lot of experience in the industry. So before we jump into it, I want to give the audience a quick bio on you. If I'm missing anything or you want to add something in there we don't know, feel free to. All right, everyone. Joshua Michael Stern is a unique talent that writes, directs, and often self-generates his financing for his projects. In 2005, his debut feature Never Was opened to the Toronto Film Festival, and it stars an incredible cast including Aaron Eckhart, Nick Nolte, Ian McKellen, and Jessica Lange, among others. He then co-wrote and directed Disney's Swing Vote, and I love this word, Capra-esque fable starring Kevin Costner as a working-class slacker in a small New Mexico border town who, thanks to a voting machine glitch, single-handedly decides a presidential election. His third feature, Jobs, was the closing night film at the Sundance Film Festival, which stars Ashton Kutcher, Josh Gad, and J.K. Simmons. Now, he's had a career as a filmmaker, and it seemed like a natural fit for him because he was born into a family with a unique show business pedigree. His grandmother, Nancy Green, worked as David O. Selznick's studio executive on the East Coast, discovering such talent as yes, Marlon Brando, and bringing actors like Alec Guinness and Jessica Tandy to America. His grandfather, Jules Green, was the original executive producer on The Tonight Show, which he created with Steve Allen. He then went on to do Graves, his first television project, which he created, wrote, and directed several episodes of for the story of a former two-term president who realizes that many things he did as president messed the country up. So he goes on a Don Quixote quest to make things right. How's that? That's pretty good.
That's you're summarizing it pretty well.
Yeah. No, but I really do love that Capra-esque. I mean, not many people can.
Well, I love Cap. You know, I've always felt like there's something life affirming about that tone of film or TV, which is something hard to do in the industry when you're trying to do comedy and drama with a slightly heightened reality. Those are the kind of magic realism type movies and shows that I respond to. So, and it's hard to generate sometimes because the industry tends to want you to be one thing, your drama, your comedy. So I like to sort of find the balance between the tones.
And I think it almost just, it's a magnet for all kinds of demographics, that copper kind of feeling that you're talking about. I think all people are drawn to it, as opposed to maybe just a pigeonholed demographic, because it is so affirming, right?
Well, it is. And it is. And I think it speaks to a bigger issue of, the kinds of stories you want to tell, as much as you want to try to second guess and figure out and handicap what the industry wants, opposed to what it is that you can generate and what you feel your passion is. Because sometimes you might feel that the things that interest you aren't the things that might interest the industry. And so I think an artist can sometimes get into a bit of a rut trying to figure out, what do I do next? Horror movies are doing great. Should I write a horror movie? No, what I really want to write is a romance, So
right.
It's really always, your career is an exercise in trying to balance what it is that you want to do and feel passionate about and what you think they want you to do,
Yeah, wonderful. And we're going to get into a little bit of that later too. I like that, Josh. I like that. Now my first question here is a little odd.
Yeah.
Don't take it as a as an abrasive question. I'm just genuinely curious. You're a busy guy. You're doing a lot of things. You speak from you speak from time to time, whether it's organizations or schools or festivals. Why are you doing this conversation?
Why am I doing this conversation?
Yeah, you could be doing anything right now, but what is it about?
Well, first of all, I have a very soft spot in my heart for New Mexico. Not just a soft spot, but a large spot. My first film, Swing Vote, we shot in New Mexico, and I spent a lot of time there. And then Graves, I spent almost 3 years there. We took over that sound stage, and I lived in New Mexico, and just really did fall in love not only with the state, but also the people and the filmmakers there and the crews, and the film office, and just everybody in New Mexico really touched my heart. And I have made friends there. I met young filmmakers there, like Hannah McPherson, for example, who's going to do bigger things, who I first worked with. She was working for the casting director that I did my first film with. And so I love New Mexico, and I met Ivan, and I really said anything I can ever do to help. I want to try to bring as much of my projects back there as possible. I tend to do that if I can, if the surroundings and the geography helps. Graves was a show that was originally set in the East Coast. I was like, why not do it in New Mexico? I mean, he could be, a Southwestern ex-president, Nick Nolte could be. So I just have a real soft spot. And so I will always make time to speak and get involved with filmmaking and the filmmakers of New Mexico.
Yeah. I got a soft spot for you. I mean, Swing Vote takes place 15 miles south of where I grew up. So I know I got a soft spot for, Belen.
You grew up where though?
I grew up in Las Lunas, which is just a few miles north of it. So that's the rivalry right there, the sports rivalry. So I got a soft spot for that too. I'm going to take a little bit of an odd pathway through these questions here. So I'm going to jump back and forth on a few things, but
sure.
I'm going to jump right to reviews. I know, I'm going to start big picture stuff, artist stuff, writer director stuff, and move back down it a little bit to into method and writing and process. But tell me a little bit about reviews, which I guess you could connect back to a little bit about reconciling the need to do what you wanted to do, what stories you want to tell versus maybe what the industry might be telling you what to do. Meaning, I'll come back to that. Give me a little. Why are reviews hard for you?
Why are reviews hard?
And
Are they
are they
hard for
still
me?
hard for you?
Are they hard
You've
for
said
me?
it in the past. I mean, maybe they aren't still. Do you read the
Oh,
reviews?
no, they're not that reviews aren't hard for me. I don't, it's hard when you spend a lot of time creating and, but I've never taken reviews too much to heart in the sense that there's always going to be a balance, on my last show, Graves, the New York Times loved it. And, Entertainment Tonight didn't love it, so it's like, you get a glowing review, you get a negative review, you get, when you're trying to create something that feels weird or off center, very often you're going to get the sort of polarized reviews in some regards. But reviews are usually just sort of an extension of yourself and how you see the world and your upbringing, and often very, very much the relationship between you. And if you really want to dig down into what reviews mean for people, it's just, what is your relationship with the people who raised you and your parents, and what's judgment mean to you, and what does that look like in your life, and how do you respond to that? And I find those who get crippled by reviews, usually are sort of more open sort of nerves to being judged in a deeper way. But they're not part of they're not really part of the zeitgeist of in my brain. I was on a press tour for something, and I happened to be in Japan, and this was for Jobs. Or was it for, no, it was for Jobs. And this guy came up to me in Japan, in random place, as I was being interviewed for something. And he came up to me and he said, Never Was is one of my favorite. Never Was my first film, I got a great cast, but it was like a tiny little thing. And he said it's one of his favorite films. And it was just so touching and moved me to such an extent, because I realized here I am in Japan, and sometimes what you do when you create, when you make something, in whatever the art is that you hope that it has a ripple effect, even though you're not aware of it very often. So reviews, the good or the bad, are not something that I think should affect or inform your direction. You should really just do the best you can with whatever that spark of inspiration is in the moment, and then move on to the next one quickly.
Yeah, there's the key there.
Yeah, it is.
Good. The consumer. I'm gonna dip into a few lines from your films here, and just general themes.
Okay.
Jobs relies heavily thematically on thinking about the consumer. I mean, Jobs was consumed by the consumer, right? And what they thought of his products. Safe to say the viewers are consuming content. They are the consumer.
Yes.
In a black and white term.
Yes.
Sense. Now, how do you respect your consumer? How are you respecting your audience? I mean, how are you how do you consider your audience in your projects? Is that clear enough there?
Yeah, I think you always consider the audience, depending on what you're working with, depending what platform. If I'm working on a TV show right now, the audience is always in mind. Mostly you're wanting them to get and understand and feel the arcs of your characters and the story you're telling. You want to make sure that you're communicating clearly. It's no different than when you just said, do I understand? You wanted to be clear with me. And I think as an artist, your goal is to communicate your idea as best as possible. And that is a collaboration of film or TV. So it's the bringing together of the director and the cinematographer and the actors especially, and the script, to make sure that what it is that you were thinking about one day in your apartment or in your house as just a spark of there's a guy who did a thing that, that whatever that germ of the thought was can get realized and be realized to best. And what's wonderful about, film and TV is that it's an imperfect art form, meaning it's very, very difficult to totally translate that vision, but you're always searching for the best way. What music do I need here? What needle drop will help this? And you are looking at the consumer. You're talking about Jobs. When I was researching about Steve Jobs, he got the inspiration for the personal computer in a Macy's when he was looking in the kitchen appliance, and he looked at this white, beautiful, sleek Cuisinart, and it was just this wonderful gadget. And it was, you pushed a button and it took an everyday thing, which was chopping potatoes and onions, and made it simple and sleek. And he found the beauty of it. And he wanted everything to have a functional simplicity, right? And so what is it that your goal is for your project? What is it that you want people to get from it? You want to, when I was doing Graves, for example, which I was very proud of, I had a lot to say about politics, but also about the emotions of one's actions and the repercussions, and what and forgiveness and redemption, which is really important for me as well. And a lot of the things that I do is, how do you come back from the things that you've done? How do you live a life not defined by your mistakes? Those kinds of issues are important for me. So I work very hard to try to articulate that. And so, like when Nick was nominated for a Golden Globe, that was a very big moment for me, because I realized that was like, okay, that worked. Other things might not have worked. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that things don't work in in what you do. And that's what makes it a sort of almost addictive bipolar industry, where you're just striving for excitement, and then it's like, this didn't work, and this worked, and that didn't work. And so you also have to sort of acknowledge your failures where you try. I was talking to a friend of mine who does horror films at one point a while ago, and horror films are hard to do, mostly because they're the articulation of a nightmare, right? And nothing is scarier than your own thoughts, right? Nothing is scarier than your own thoughts. So we work so hard to try to get the music and the editing, and you're doing everything you can to realize what you're thinking about. And I think in the end, that's what we're all doing our best at when we do art and when we're doing films, is to try our best to realize our original thought and our original intention.
And translate that as clearly as possible. Yeah. Are you taking things like the I don't know, it just seems big with me, taking the audience's time into consideration, pacing, just things as plastic as that? Like, are you focused on, they're going to get bored with this, it's my duty to speed it up for them?
You mean, yeah, I think you do have a sense of the pace, and again, back to how is this hitting the audience. But there's a couple of interesting subcategories of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
One of them is, you have to also trust your audiences. There's a school of thought that's going on that sort of says we stopped trusting audiences at a certain point. And what Netflix has done, and a lot of these shows has done, is said, okay, you know what? I'm going to tell you a very simple story over 10 episodes and 10 hours, and it's going to be slow, and you're going to have patience. And if you want to figure it out, you're going to have to stick with it. And I think that's great for storytelling. And why I got into TV as well was that it really opens up that ability to trust the audience that they're going to stay with a good story, and give them a story that you want to tell, and hope that they have the patience to stay with it, and to get what you're trying to articulate.
So respecting your audience by giving them the benefit of the doubt that they will.
I think by giving them the benefit of the doubt. Now, the truth of the matter is, it's really hard, because as I said, I'm working on a show right now for CBS All Access as an EP on it. And, that's sometimes we work too hard. And I'm not saying we're doing that in this show, but I'm saying that you're very aware, especially in a network setting, to make sure that you hang a lantern on certain things so the audience understands what you're doing all steps of the way, every step of the way. And sometimes that is important. I mean, sometimes it is, important. One of the things that's beneath your question to me is, I don't believe in the sort of hubris of the artist, where it's like, whatever.
That's what I'm talking. Yeah.
If they don't get it, I don't care. I don't believe that at all. I think you need to be very aware that the audience is tracking the story, and when they're confused, it's deliberate, and it's part of the architecture of the piece, that they need to be confused right here, and they need to not be confused here, and we need to ask a question here and answer it there. But you know, that's delicate, and the other thing about it all is that it's all subjective, and that's what's the hardest part of our industry, is that what makes sense to you won't make sense to this person. We all come to any particular show with our own set of experiences and our own sort of emotional IQs, and why does one thing make sense to somebody else? And you know, it's that old cliche of what's happening, you know, he's behind the door. People, you know, my wife is very good with mysteries and guesses everything. I don't guess anything. And we're watching the same thing, and I'm always surprised. Like, I'm an easiest audience. I'm shocked every time. And the credits stop rolling, and she totally, she gets it. You know, she knows exactly who did it, where they did it, why they did it. You know, I'm not right after the credits, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's also a balance of, well, you know, we're going to lose some people, but they'll catch up. You know.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. I'm glad you say the word subjective. This may be a little bit of a selfish question. There was a discussion at a panel not too long ago where, at the time and in the context of it, I felt right in saying, so I judged the quality of something. And the moderator called me out and dismissed it and said quality is subjective, and moved on. And maybe she was right in that context, but Josh, I'm just going to throw you that umbrella statement. Quality is subjective. Do you agree with that?
When you say quality, define when you were critiquing something, when you say quality, the way it was mounted, the cinematography, or do you mean when you say quality, what is that you're saying?
I think just the whole package. That movie, I think Godfather 2 is a good movie. The Room is not. That could ultimately be subjective. Yeah, in the way it's mounted, in the way it respects its audience, its lasting impact. I mean, would you?
Well, I have a thought on that.
Yeah.
I've thought and struggled with this a little bit myself. Part of it, when I approach a film and I do my stuff, I'm a very, very big details person. I storyboard. I work with my cinematographers, Russell Carpenter on one. I mean, I work with great DPs. Philip Glass was my first composer. I am very, very quality, or I when you say quality, it's more than I'm more detail oriented, and I'm a subjective filmmaker. I like to mount the production. I have always been fascinated, jealous, and coveting of people who walk into a film and they do verite, all handheld, very improv, not beautiful lighting, kind of a little bit more happenstance, and a kind of like that movie 13 that Catherine Hardwicke did, which was beautiful. But there's a beauty in that to me. And part of my thought's always been, well, and that's very hard for me to do that, by the way. It's very hard for me not to do coverage. It's very hard for me just to do everything in a oneer and hope that it works. These are things that are hard for me. But there are other filmmakers who are brilliant. And I've always thought that isn't what I would say is epic. It doesn't have that widescreen scope. The score was a little bit synthesized, whatever you want to say. I didn't love the music, but there's something amazing about the intimacy of that film, for example. So quality is only subjective in the sense that you have to understand, what does the material want, right? Like, what does the material want? Now, if the material wants something that you think was just completely off, then that's one thing. But I do think quality is something that I sort of agree is subjective, because what one might consider to be beautiful and mounted gorgeously, another might not. What was that movie? That Emma Stone was in, the period piece with Rachel Weisz, and with the actors who played the Queen, was in that wonderful Damien, what's his name, director who did The Lobster, directed it. I forget.
The Favorite, yeah.
The Favorite. Like I liked that film a lot, but I had friends who hated that widescreen fish lens and lots of stuff. They were like, oh, they were taking, again, that was subjective. I thought that was great. So on all levels, there is that judgment that one can make. The other thing, the last thing I'll say about it, and this is where you need discernment a little bit. How much of what you're judging is a mistake and unintentional, which to me goes more towards sloppy, and how much of it was intended and you just don't agree with the choice? Because if it's a choice that you don't agree with, then that is totally subjective. If you believe this and there are many films. I mean, there's so many films where that actor just did it for the paycheck, and it's it's that Al Pacino, Avi Lerner type of, who Al Pacino I love, but okay, they made this for $7 million, they paid Al $6 million. It was done for $1.5 million in Bulgaria. I've written in the beginning part of my career, I did a lot of rewrites and a lot of stuff for like indie films of that. And that's fair to say. The quality of this thing isn't great,
That's great. Thank you, Josh. Thank you. That'll be a fight that goes on and on and on.
Well, that's what art is. That's the critic. I mean, it's like the artist saying the guy who ate a banana and then stuck it onto a canvas and charged $1 million for it. I mean, it seems
you can't tell
utterly
me that's not
ridiculous to me. But there are people who say, don't judge it. That's subjective.
Let me transition into. I'm going to say the word eagerness. I'm gonna look. You're 3 features in. You've done Graves, a television project. We're calling you a showrunner on Graves, right? I mean, you wrote it, you directed some, and you created it.
Yeah.
Now, at the start of your career, little bit different than people getting in now. And maybe I asked this question for myself and many others in the industry, and especially our community here in New Mexico, who are aspiring to be where you are. At the beginning of your career, did you feel pretty comfortable going in? I mean, would you say you had connections? How much strife was there at the beginning of at least getting your foot in the door?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is that I have friends that I started coming up with who have never had one thing produced, but they've had a very comfortable life as writers. And of all the things that I've made, there's just as many of the things that I sold and almost got made. There's things that, I've set up and haven't gone yet. But mostly I'll say that it's a difficult industry. When I started off, I did not have a leg up really in any way, even though I have a certain amount of, I do have a history in my family of being in the film industry and the TVs. I didn't really have that. I mean, what I always knew and what was right for me is that I had to write. Writing was my way in. Whatever, if I directed, ultimately, I always started off as a writer. And that's still what I'm doing right now. I mean, that is what my entry was. I knew if I could write it and people liked it, I could direct it. But I also knew if I could write it, I could always sort of kind of have that as well, if I could get that going. It's a very hard thing to do, except to say that there are a lot of mistakes that young writers make at the beginning. The first one is to think that anything they're writing is the thing that they have to write and get done. That nothing is the thing. There isn't the thing. There isn't the script. There isn't the one. There's just the one that you did in June. What's the one you're going to do in September? The reality is that most writers, and this is the truth, and I remember that someone did statistics, successful writers really don't sell anything sometimes in their 7th or 8th script that they've written, as far as what script it is that they wrote. It's a very hard journey to take, especially at the beginning, because at the beginning there's the dream and the hope of something happening big, right? There's you project what you want your future to be, and it usually isn't, oh my gosh, I'm 25, I'm 26, my first one's I'm gonna hit at 32. No, I mean, that's not going to be what you think about. It's also, there's a lot of other things that are involved. But I always think, and I know, that you have to just keep doing it. It is a craft. It is something that is that you cannot be good at out of the gate. And very, very few people, there's not one person whose first script, with lots of exceptions, but very few people's first script or second or third is even great. It just isn't. Sometimes it gets bought. Sometimes it's a genre film, and we tend to start in genres when we first start writing plot-driven stuff. You know, whether it's action or thrillers or horror, or we just tend to do stuff because dialogue is harder for writers. It just always is. It's harder for writers and young writers, especially because they're not even fully developed. And so they're even, you know, if you have a hard time communicating with, you know, on a date, you know, how are you going to understand the breadth of knowledge of what it is to be somebody in a marriage, in certain, so I know young writers tend to go towards genre because it depends less on that, and it hangs more on plot. But I think that you have to just keep doing it. And on some level, I remember many times in my career, I thought, gosh, I wish I could do anything else. I wish I wanted to do anything else. I would kill. I know there'd be so many things I'd be good at. And I've often thought if I had just stopped and done this and done that, you know, it would have been easier to be in the infrastructure of a corporation, or, you know, or being, you know, but in the end, I had to do it. And that's always a hard reckoning with yourself when you have to do something. When you have, and sometimes people realize they have to do it, and then at a certain point they think I had to do it, but now I'm going to be an executive. Now I'm going to be a producer because I'm not being successful, and I have to, you know, I have a wife now, or it's getting to a point where I have to make a decision. What's my B plan? You know, all those things. But let me just say, I'm still getting from my mother at this stage in my, you know, so what's next? What's next? I mean, there's nothing that I can ultimately do for the people that are around me in my life to give them comfort that I'm going to have security in the future, regardless of how successful you are. So that's what plagues the artist, is that you're always in need and at the dependency of your benefactor. No different than a troupe of Shakespeare actors who just were thinking, where are we going to play next, and which duke or duchess is going to pay for our residency. You know, that's who we are in the end.
Yeah. And it's great that you should get to the I have to do this stage, because it's a long way of getting to where I was going with that question. But it is that those initial stages when people have to do this. My overall thing here is the word eagerness. Now, I know, everyone. I know. I'm wording it. I'm clarifying it for the audience because I respect my audience. The degree of eagerness in people coming up in the industry. You've been around for a little. You've been doing this. Is eagerness generally a turnoff, and how can people dial that in to where it's not off-putting? I mean, everyone's so excited to get in. I mean, they'll track you down an alley. They'll try and get a hold of your manager. They'll call your kid's school. I mean, people are so eager because they have to do it. And I guess it's just coming around to, is there a degree of people, when people pick up on you wanting something so badly that it's not a good thing? That is a long question, Josh.
Well, but that's a question in life. That's a question when you go on a date. That's a question when you walk into an interview. That's a question when you go into a Starbucks. I mean, you know, that person who comes up to the register is like, you know, I want that latte. I gotta have that latte. You know, you can make it for me. You know, it's like, oh, hey, all right. You want a latte? It's coffee and milk. You know, I mean, you know, eagerness is something that you can temper. I think that my advice is always openness, because you have to feel like somebody who wants to learn and who is humble and who doesn't have all the answers. When I get sent a script, something I always hate, and I have never said this before, but I've just thought about it, is sometimes somebody will send me a script and they'll say, enjoy, exclamation point. I'm like, enjoy. Because there's a presupposition that it's so good that I'm giving you a gift. And each step of the way in your career is that you are actually just simply wanting help with what you're doing. You want somebody to say, and you want to be educated on what it is that you've done, how can you make it better, and how can you get what you and how and can you find someone to help you make it better? And I think that there is a writers by nature have often a confidence and a self-assuredness sometimes about their writing, which is where eagerness goes sour. Eagerness coupled with openness is very, it's like eagerness. This is eager and open. Eager is like, I just wrote something, and it comes from my heart. I know you're busy, and look, I think I'm a little stuck on a few spots, but I really think there's something there. I'd love for you, to take a look. I think you'll think it's special. I mean, I do, but whether you do or not, I'd love your feedback. Then there is, dude, I wrote a script. It's so good. I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know if it's good or not, but it's really great. You've got to read it, man. It's so fucking insane. Pardon my French, right? But that's a lot of how writers will try. Version 1, I'm like, oh, okay. Version 2, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's, you're 24 years old and you've written. Like, so for me, eagerness is you're a student. We're all students of this art. And we are, Kurosawa, when he was 90, said he's still learning. You have got to walk in earning. There is something about writing and filmmaking that feels entitled for some reason. It's the only thing on earth where someone could literally do and have no experience in something, zero, and say, I am something, by the fact that they, in their house at nights, wrote something, because they can. You are not that thing. You are a student of that thing. And even when you become, I'm still uncomfortable sometimes. I still get a little weird. I'm a director, I'm a writer. I still have a self-consciousness about it, because I still feel like there's something so much to learn. You have to own what you are, but you also have to know that you're the student of that thing. And that you have to know, and you have to be patient with yourself, because you didn't go to become a doctor, which takes 6 to 8 years before you're even paying back your debt in your mid-30s, right? Like, there is none of that. But there is a sense sometimes in our industry that people kind of come out of the gate feeling like this is going to get me there,
Yeah.
And it's a profession, it's a profession. And so I think you've got to look at it like that, and you've got to discipline yourself as if you are at work and you're in a profession doing something every day towards that profession. And so that's I don't know if that answered the question.
No, it does. And I mean, I'm seeing some of it happen right now. I mean, I talked to you last night for a little bit before the interview. And after I got off the phone, I said to myself, damn, Andy, like even on the phone, you probably just sounded so excited and eager. I wonder if you turned him off from it just because the level of excitement.
You were great. No, you were great on the phone, because you were open and you were honest. And, a lot of everything that we do in our life is just a reflection of ourselves and how we communicate in our normal lives. And when you go into relationship with anyone in the industry, it's just an extension of that. So if you're an insecure person, you're going to be insecure in the industry. If you're a self-assured person, you're going to be that person. If you're narcissistic, which is a lot of people who are in this industry, you're going to be that person. And if you're going to have problems in this industry, as we've had a lot of people recently having problems in this industry, especially men on every level, we know what we're talking about. That is just simply a reflection of who you are in private and who you are as a person. And so you, I think, need to constantly come to every relationship with what you had on that phone, with me, but a certain amount of kindness and eagerness. And I was impressed with the fact that you had done some research, but we're always impressed with that. Of course we are. If you go into a job interview tomorrow and you're in a job at a bank, and all you did is you Googled or you linked in the guy who's going to be the manager you're talking to, and you found out that he went to Syracuse University, and you sit down and say, oh, I heard you went to Syracuse. Yeah. He's like, yeah, I love the football, whatever. I mean, whatever your conversation would be, instantly, that person softens to you, because you've acknowledged them made them feel as if they meant enough to you for them to find something out about you and commune with them. I don't know, that's to me the reflection of the industry, how you treat people on a set, when I have a writer's room, how I treat my writers, my directors, my crew, my actors. It's all a reflection of who you are and where you come from. Yeah.
That's great, Josh. Thank you. I did want to jump to. All right, everyone. This is from Swing Vote. So this is a line here from Swing Vote. First, we have Nathan Lane. We have Dennis Hopper saying to Nathan Lane, "You used to run campaigns that meant something." And Nathan Lane's response is, "No, they would have meant something if the candidates I backed had actually won. Do you know what it's like to be on the right side of every issue that never gets beyond the theory stage, the hope that rocks with every loss?" Now, tell us a little bit on how I don't know if that was, I mean, you did not write Swing Vote, right? That was
I co-wrote it. Yeah.
You co-wrote Swing Vote.
Yeah, with Jason
Jobs. There we go. Sorry, the other one.
Yeah.
Does that line resonate with you? Things that never got off the ground,
yeah.
Things that were special to you, and
yeah.
And how do
well,
you
it also resonates. Look, I got to be honest. I've been very lucky. I remember when I was on Graves and I was singing at one point, and I turned to somebody, and it's always in the moment because you reverse yourself usually with these thoughts. But I thought, you know what, I'm okay. I want someone to go onto iTunes and watch this because Nick Nolte or Celia Ward or whoever the character was is saying things that I want. I've written 22 hours of TV that have gotten onto the air. And these actors have said these lines and have communicated my thoughts. And that is why I do it. I would never do this if I had not been able to achieve my work being produced. I mean, at every step of the way, even in my, when I first started, what before never was, I mean, getting, my first gig was writing for a dumb horror film that was, an Amityville Horror sequel was my first gig right out of college, so I knew within myself, I am doing this not to have that piece of material sit theoretically on my computer. I am absolutely doing this for people to see in any good, bad, or indifferent, however it gets produced. But there's a lot of writers out there for whom writing, it's the act of writing. Like they write and they've had a great career and never had anything produced. I mean, there's a reality to being a writer, which is very different than other writers. It's the only art form for where the only people that are reading, when you're a novelist, the people who are reading your work are people who have paid to read it, have paid to download the book. Our industry is the only industry where the only people ever reading your work are people who are being paid to read it. Are the executives and producers, who never would have picked, and I don't want to stop at that stage. I want to get to the next stage, for me. By the way, this is not a judgment on people who've had a career having written and who have never had anything necessarily produced. They've had great careers and probably made a lot more money than me, a lot of them. But the reality for me is that I really was so focused on getting my things made. And my kind of thought about how to do that was to write characters, aside from whatever the story was, that an actor would want to play. Because the second you write something that an actor wants to play, it will get made. And the problem with young writers, in my opinion, when you start off, is that you tend to write such genre stuff for so long. So you write, the cop, the thriller, the horror, the big comedy, because, instead of writing that one story of the guy who hasn't come out of the woods in 20 years because he was, whatever he is, he's a guy who, whatever, but it's a character study, right? Like, oh, but 10 actors would love to play that role. So for me, the key is that whatever you write, you need to always keep in mind that it's not about, oh, this is the best story. This is the best role. This is the best character. because that's all we're watching in the end, especially when we're writing independent films. I'm not talking about like, big tentpole films and, huge and, Fast and the Furious films, because if that's where you are, that's what you should write. But for most people, when they start off, they need to get there before you can make the $300 million action film. You got to start somewhere where people say, God, he creates great characters. So if you can do a cop movie, if you're going to do a thriller, then think about the great thrillers, and all the great thrillers are all revolve around great dynamics of character and arc, and have flushed out relationships that you think about, oh, this would be fun. There's going to be an actor who's going to kill this.
Yeah. Because you do write to produce, does it hurt that much more when one of your things doesn't get off the ground? I know that you had a passion to make a film version of King Lear, correct? And that fell through. I mean, is that
yeah, that's painful. It happens to everyone. It happens to every director, no matter what level you are. At King Lear, I had Anthony Hopkins, I had Anne Hathaway. I had a huge cast. But the problem with that project was that it was Shakespeare, so it had a limited value in the marketplace. So it's like, let's say with that cast, which also included Gwyneth Paltrow and Naomi Watts, it was huge. Let's say I needed $30 million to make that film, but it only really could raise, let's say, 13 million, because it was Shakespeare and it had a limited audience, meaning it wasn't going to play everywhere. I tried my best. I always do my best, and that one failed. And there's others that failed. Last year, I've sold TV shows. Last year I did a TV show that I had Jimmy Kimmel was my producer and Skylar Astin, and we got sold to ABC, and it just got almost there and didn't get picked up to series. And that's everybody's story, right? Like all of us have those stories. But that's also part of the that's part of your buy-in to the industry. If you're doing well, you're always going to have the big, but I always say fail big. If I'm going to fail on King Lear, I'm going to fail with that cast.
Yeah, that's epic. That's epic.
I'm going to fail big. Yeah.
Okay, I love this line, also from Jobs. Steve, how can you be a creative and have a board of directors at the same time? I know you have a vision, everything you do. Tell us a little bit about how you balance sharing that with financiers, studios, department heads. How much are you willing to give up decisions, and is that hard for you? How do you maintain that vision?
First of all, you can't go into this industry if you cannot give yourself into collaboration. You just should do something else. I really believe that at this part. Or you should do this, but know it's going to be a bumpy ride. Everything is collaboration. Everything is collaboration. And you are completely and totally expendable. That is just the truth of it. Meaning that every writer's contract you will always sign only guarantees that you're even going to be slightly part of it for maybe one more draft, right? Every director gig you have has an out for the studio. That just goes to say that you have to be able to take notes. You have to be able to collaborate with producers. You have to be able to know how to read the note. You have to be able to take a note that says something you don't want, but turn it into something that you want. You have to be open to the fact that they're gonna have casting decisions that are gonna be out of your hands. You're going to have many decisions from editorial that are going to be out of your hands. Look, making a film or making TV is a progressive pyramid of anxieties for a writer, right? So you start off in your room and you have an idea about whatever that idea is about. It's just a thought. It's a thought. Who would ever think that thought had value? So then you write it, and then you think, all I want is for someone to acknowledge this thought. Then someone likes it. That's okay, great. Then all you want is for someone to buy that thought. Then someone buys it. Oh, now you're excited because it's come true, that dream. But now all you want is someone to make that now that they've bought it. And then they make it. And then all you want them to do is make it right and cast it right. Oh, please. And then they cast it wrong. And you're like, oh, no, they didn't do that right. God damn it. Now you're starting to get all disgruntled, forgetting the fact that way back when you would have given your left leg in that apartment, with no rent and about to have to go to work at a real estate company, that you now can do this as a living. You don't care about that anymore. You just want it to be cast right. Yeah. And then they make it. And then all you want is for them to distribute it Right. And you want to not to, I'll never forget when you walk into distribution meetings, it's like, you're going to release it in August, like all of a sudden, and then, that's the poster. Like you're like, it's an ascending sense of anxieties that are always like, what is next? What's the next thing? So it's always a collaboration. You're always going to have disappointments, but you have to be open to it. And those who do best are those who play well with others and who are open to that collaboration, because you need to keep, if you love the script that you wrote, you need to be part of that process from the beginning to the end. And it's very easy. It's written into every contract that they can remove you from that. Those who stay in it are those who can collaborate.
It's powerful stuff there. Thank you, Josh. Difference from maybe generally a single writer on a film, maybe a couple. When it comes to television, you've said the term a socialism of ideas.
Oh, I did say that. When did I?
Yeah, I mean, break that down a little bit. What is a writer's room like? What is?
Well, a writer's room is interesting because it's, if you're a writer out there, you have had your idea. It's your idea. It's your intellectual property. It's a thought. You do everything you can. You register it with the WGA, which is we do all the things we think we're going to do to protect our thought. But a writer's room is this. It's like your thought is everybody's thought. Your best idea could be that other writer's episode that they're writing. You'll never get credited on it. Or they're credited on that, but you write 70% of it because because the showrunner has said, I want you to take over this. It's an interesting environment for writers who are brought up to have ownership over their ideas and their thoughts and their scripts, and to have to share that, and the egos involved, and writers tend to be contrary, if you go to a movie that you think is okay, but the person next to you adores it, you're going to instantly want to say, it wasn't, you're going to go the other way, trying to convince how you didn't love the movie, even though it wasn't as bad as really you're saying it. But writers tend to be contrary because, we look for those little things we talked about before, the subjective gaps in logic and story and casting, all the things that we think are good or bad about it, and that exists in a writer's room. And so it makes it for very lively and frustrating sometimes. But ultimately, what TV does and what it's doing now, especially, is phenomenal.
Is it something you're growing to? I mean, Graves was your first time doing kind of a writer's room.
I'm all in. I'm all in as a writer because, the challenge of first of all, the independent film world is very, very difficult. It became difficult about 5 or 6 years ago, a little more than that actually, but the last 5 or 6 years have just been really rough. It's hard to get films made. It's almost impossible to get them distributed anymore. I mean, they're all, because I was working for a little bit of time at the end of last year with Robert De Niro on a movie that actually lost its financing, ironically, but he had done, this was in the middle of him promoting The Irishman, and The Irishman was a $250 million film that went to Netflix. I mean, that just, to me, changed everything. It's all different now. Mulan pretty much writes to Disney Plus on some level. So the bar is changing. And what we used to say is TV is different, because as we were talking about, TV used to simply be a definition of a genre. Like, now it's simply a definition of the literal way in which that you're getting your media. It's not the genre anymore. I mean, because you can see a $250 million blockbuster on your TV, but you're not watching TV. You're watching a Scorsese film with, Pacino and De Niro. Yeah. So it's like it's changing our perception. The evolution of entertainment is changing. Also, when you write TV, it's the challenge of expanding a character. That what the hell is he going to do in this season? What's he going to do in that season? It becomes it's a puzzle that's fun to look. It's challenging, but it's fun.
Speaking of television writing, all the structuring that goes into that. I mean, it's no secret the benefit of plotting, of outlining, but you're a huge proponent of that. I mean, that's That's your
For
style.
me,
You don't just sit down and create a storm of character. You've plotted that out. I mean,
Oh,
is
yeah.
that a
Yeah.
is that a common thing? Is that
The
I mean,
hardest thing that I've ever spoken to a writer, especially a young writer, about and what to do is to detail treatment and outline a script, whether it's a script for a pilot or a script for a film. I don't know why it feels there's something about writers that are almost kind of universally a little bit attention deficit disordered. They're always bop 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 bop. You know, it's the discipline, you know, and to me that goes back to the fact that it's a self-generated discipline. It's not a discipline where it has been forced upon you. Anything that anyone does, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, or a psychiatrist, the discipline is forced on you. You have got to read the DF. You've got to read the most disgustingly dense stuff, and you can't get away from it. You have to do it because you're going to be a doctor. You have to do it, not because you want to. There's not a lawyer around who can tell you that they wanted to take that test again because they failed it and had to study till 2 a.m. A writer says, I'm going to write 120 pages and I'm just going to stream of conscious it. No, you've got to know where your characters are going. You've got to plot it out. I do outlines where I do scene headings, you know, exteriors, interiors, and I just write the line or two of what's going to happen next. I need to see how it's going to lay out. I like to figure that out way ahead of time. The other mistake is that you don't let people read your stuff at that stage. You should have as many people as you trust read what you want to write at the stage before you write it. And if it's a detailed outline, meaning you wrote it like a story, then the person can say, if they can envision it enough, they can say, I liked it, but I didn't like when the little girl died. And then the second person says it. And you're like, oh no, she's got to die. And they're like, no, I think it's just, and then you're like, wait, well, maybe if she's just kidnapped, like, you know, so to me, it's all about getting as much information as you can so that you can basically sort of gear yourself up and give yourself enough of a leg up for success, because it's all about success.
Yeah.
You know?
So you don't burn out in a hole somewhere that you made yourself. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Off of that, knowing yourself as a writer, benefits of that, meaning knowing whether you're an action writer, whether or not you're knowing yourself as a how important is that?
It's very important. When I was in college, I was an acting teacher. I was in an acting class, and the actor teacher went to everyone who was a senior and said, cast yourself in every movie that was done last year, because last year they were casting the movies you just saw, right? So, and almost to an actor, they had miscast themselves, meaning they didn't know that you're the best friend. You're not the lead. And if you keep thinking you're the lead, you're probably not going to do well, because you're going to walk into rooms thinking you're the lead, right? Yeah. I think the same thing is with writers. I think that I've never really ascribed to this philosophy that you should write what you know in a big way. I think when you start off, writing what you know is good. But a lot of us, what do we know? We grew up in a suburban neighborhood with great parents and clean streets and good schools. I mean, you know, write what you imagine and interests you. Write what is fascinating for you. When I was growing up, you know, weird stuff fascinated me, like arcane stuff, things that were dark, like witches and like weird. You know, like I had a lot of, and also like when I was, so I started off doing, to be honest, like horror stuff when I first started, because that's kind of the stuff that when I was in my early 20s, there was something, you know, I loved, you know, The Shining and those sort of films. So for me, there were like, I love The Shining and those sort of films, but I also, the other part of me loved Harold and Maude, and I loved all the kind of the drama, like we talked about Copper, and then in the end that won out, you know. But when I started off, when I was young, it was darker stuff. So it's exploring those things that interest you, you know, and then trying to find an original take or in on something, and that's always the key, is what's the original take. Like I had a meeting with a writer, and they pitched me this idea for a zombie TV show. And I'm like, a zombie show, right? I think if you try to pitch me a zombie show, there is literally no angle that would be original. It's just like what I wrote. I was hired to write a zombie movie, you know, a long time ago that was about the space shuttle that goes up and comes down. The world are all zombies. Like, I've done it, like zombies. And she said, no, this is the story. So there's a small town, and there's a girl who, when she was, in high school, she was kind of seen as the the loose girl in school, right? She was like the slutty girl. But then it ends up being that, so now it's like they're in college, and then the entire world turns into zombies. And it turns out she's the only girl with the anecdote in her blood, and the only people who have survived the zombie apocalypse are her and all the guys that she slept with, in some regards, because she had the antidote, right? So it's just turned these and they're all against the zombie world, all these idiot guys. And I thought, all right, there's an angle of something where, okay, so
Gotcha. Yeah.
so anyway, there's always an angle, and there's always a new take on something.
And describe a little bit. I know you've said before you believe in the duty as a writer to also take acting classes, to know that side of the art, to know the acting, and for directors to do the same thing, because to you it's kind of a linked language. Could you explain a little bit on that?
The irony for most writers, or young writers, is they have no idea how to write. For example, if they're a male writer, how to write a female roles, and sometimes writers tend to be people who themselves have no link towards their own emotional life. Like, have no idea about what makes people tick and what are the dynamics of a relationship. I mean, you're 24 years old and you're writing stories about, a mom is married, but she loses a child, and the husband and her have a really hard time getting over it. And so she, like you're writing shit like that, right? But you have no sense. And to be honest with you, if you're a writer, you probably have a very bad sense of intimacy with others and with relationships, and you're probably very difficult, impossible to get along with. But the reality is that when you take an acting course, acting is geared towards an understanding of what an intention of an actor is. And that helps you write a scene. When you write a scene, every scene you ever write, you have to know, what is this scene about? What's my verb? What's the intention? To do what? To coerce, to fall in love, what am I doing in this scene? What does my character want? What's my character feeling? And sometimes we need, acting courses are really the tools and the blueprint and the scripts to figuring out human relationships, because that is what acting is. It's the edifice and the pretense of recreating an emotional, human interaction. But those human interactions sometimes are harder for us to that's why dialogue is so hard for young writers and for older writers. Dialogue is really hard because you're emulating something that is stream of consciousness, and you're trying to get reality in moments. We always tend to overwrite. We always tend to fall flat. We tend to make the subtext the text. We never say what we are saying. If you take a reality TV show and you see people who are falling in love, they'll take months before they say they're actually in love. But when you write, you tend to want to put too much in the forefront when that's the subtext. All of that is helped when you understand acting. And if you want to direct, you have to take acting courses. You have to know the language of actors, because actors were in acting school, and they know you need to understand how to give a note when they're not doing and or experiencing the scene the way you feel the whole story needs it, because only you know the whole story, not just a slice of the scene that you're shooting that day.
Right. Perfect. I'm gonna already start to jump in a few questions.
Okay.
We have Kira writing in, Kira Sipler, I believe. Mr. Stern, what advice do you give to a screenwriter on how to not quit during times of rejection and disappointment?
That's a rough one. It's rough because, you don't know someone's financial situation. And I certainly had really, really bad years, and then really good years. It's very much feast or famine. And I'm going to venture to say it's feast or famine your whole career. It's feast or famine from the beginning to the end. And, you get better at hopefully making the feast years last longer.
Mm-hmm.
But we are nomadic. The great thing about TV to some extent is that it has more stability, but everything ends. The best TV show ends. So if the top, if you get 3 or 4 years of stability, that would be amazing, or 5 years would be a godsend. But imagine a world where someone says the most stability you'll ever get is five consecutive years. Most people think about 40 consecutive years, So you have to be self-aware. You also have to, this is the hardest thing to know, and this is where the subjectivity comes into mind. You have to know whether you're good at it or if you're good enough at it. And that's where people fall. That's the hardest part of someone's journey, because you're trying to self-realize and understand that I love this so much, but I'm not going to be good at it. Now, is this any different than someone who says, I'm a singer and I'm not going to be Billie, Eilish? But I'm now realizing that I'm 28 or 29 or 30 and I'm just not going to be that singer. Or I'm a dancer and I'm realizing now I'm not going to dance to Joffrey. Or I'm a violinist and I realize I'm not going to play at the Met, or whatever it is. As an artist, very often you whatever the metrics is that judges success, which is different in all of those disciplines, right, you have to make a self-analysis of that. But also know that it's not a failure to you as a human being. We have this way of communicating to people around us when we want to write and convince them that this is going to happen, right? And when it's not happening, the idea, the blow to your ego to try to go back and say, you were right. What was I doing? This was always so silly, is very, very hard. You almost want to prove the world wrong at a certain point in your career, I think, if you have had a hard time having success. But at the same time, life is very, very short. And there needs to be a watershed moment where you realize, you know what? It's okay if I didn't make this work for myself. It's okay if I didn't get a career. I'm an artist. I did the very best I could. And I'm going to find joy in something else. And I can still do this, by the way. But I think that there's always a way out. Now, the way to keep through those moments that you are having the doubt about and sticking with it is to keep your ideas going, is to have your day of depression, have your horrible day, and the next day, take that walk, go online, figure out your next idea, because your next idea is what's going to inspire you, to give you that excitement. And, it is, the problem with writing is there's a bit of, there's kind of this weird kind of addiction to it. You're addicted to the idea and the excitement you're going to get. Then you write it. Then you want people's reactions. Then you get addicted to the fact that they send it out and will someone buy it? And then if it doesn't work, you get really depressed, as if you lost that big horse race, right? God damn it. That one didn't work. And you don't want to let it go. And the thought that you just spent 3 months on a script that will never be seen and it's on your computer is hard, but that's part of the process. You got to write the next one. You've got to write the next one. And if you can get up and write the next one, but it's also learning of what's going to make the next one work. And the way that you do that, in my opinion, is you bring as many people into your process as possible. That's hard for me to do, by the way, but it's like my wife gives me notes, and they're harsh sometimes. And I love, sometimes you get angry and frustrated, but you want to bring people into your world. You want as many people to take part of your success as possible by giving you as much feedback as possible.
Wonderful. How do you know when your script or pilot is ready to move to the next step, or should go, in the trash?
Oh, well, it should never go in the trash. But unless you yourself, like, I love it when a writer says, this sucks, and it's terrible. I'm not gonna continue this. Sometimes there's great unfinished works. How do you know when something's finished? That's really hard. You know why that's hard? Because it's never finished. That's what makes it's even harder when you're editing or directing, because you realize that there are so many different variations of that life. But at a certain point, it has to be done. And there's always going to be a note for someone who's going to have a problem with a character or something. It's just the feedback that you get. It's just having people tell you in your life that you trust. You need to find someone in your life that you trust. You have to seek that person out. You have to know who they are. If you have a course, get to know that professor who you can then email afterwards and say, would you mind giving me notes? If you want to sign up for one of these things that they actually give you script notes, though I don't always love them, I think it's still very subjective. I do think that there is that for people who do not live in the industry, it is probably, if you're going to spend, $100 on a spree at Amazon or getting script notes, I would say get those script notes, because these people usually are people who can give you notes. But it's really about when you feel right, and when you feel that you've got a consistent enough response that people like it, that you trust can give you the truth or tell you the truth.
Elephant in the room. COVID-19. How are you doing? How do you see things playing out? That's broad.
It's very weird. I mean, it's really weird. I'm in a writer's room right now for a CBS All Access show that I'm on called Why Women Kill. It's it's an anthology show for CBS All Access, and we're doing a Zoom room. So it's really hard. Zoom is difficult because we underestimate the human when you're in a writer's room, the human contact and the energy that we get off of each other. Zoom is a great way of just giving a reflection of yourself, right? You're just looking, you're objectifying yourself in every moment. You're actually looking at yourself. You're speaking to yourself. You're not really speaking to the people that are on the Zoom. So when you're writing a story and trying to break story, it's hard. We do it and it works. So let me say it works. It doesn't not work. Or you're pitching, it works. But you're missing an intimacy. You're missing an intimacy. As far as the industry goes, I don't know. We're just getting up going on this one TV show, but production is hard because insurance, and how are people going to shut down if one person tests positive, and how can you test? You're testing everybody every 3 days, and actors lives are the by definition the worst case scenario for COVID. You're in a small, hot room with someone who you're emoting to take after take after take, and you are kissing and fighting and talking. All art, all TV, all film is about heightened emotion. So, how do you protect the actors? Rob Pattinson went down, he's back up, thank God. But I mean, insurance, when you go down, so it's a trick. It's discouraging, but we'll get through it, as everything. We always get through everything, really. But it is rough.
Are you in production on your show, or are you just?
Yeah, this show is in production. We've got great casting. I can't really talk about the casting, but they're, sure. We're in pre-production. We're not
pre-production.
Yeah,
okay.
It's things are just starting. This show would go in October.
In Los Angeles.
In the end of October in LA. And the other thing is that it's a very stage oriented show, so it's easier to do. A lot of shows have been canceled because they're extremely location heavy, but that's just now, because it's harder to be in big places with lots of people and bring a crew of 100 people into a neighborhood. Makes people anxious.
Restrictions. I know you spoke a little bit on some of your first works there. Remind me here, the Amityville Horror sequel, you've stated you had some restrictions on that, as far as, you can't have blood in the Amityville in the sequel.
Well, my Amityville Horror gig was like the classic first gig as a writer. Like, all you want to do is get a gig. So you go to this thing and you walk into the meeting, and I think it's going to be a sequel to the Amityville Horror House. It's going to be a house. It's going to be haunted. So I sat down with the guy and he said, all right, so this is the idea. And then you got to go away and come up with the idea. He says, well, so it's not the house, it's set in Antelope Valley. I'm like, oh, because I thought it was in Amityville, New York, no. And we're going to make it, it's not the house. The house it looks like every old, any community house, like one of those little development houses. It's going to be actually a doll house that looks like the Amityville horror house. A doll house. Yeah, and they find it at a garage sale, and then I don't know what happens with it, but the dollhouse you bring scariness to this family, but I want it to be a blended family, and I want there to be no blood and there's no sex, and because I want it to be very PG, and go back and come up with an idea. So then my drive home was very different than my drive to. I was so excited. I'm going, oh God, I mean, my first gig, what's it going to be, you know? So of course I walk in and I did what you do with anything that's an object, as I made the Amityville dollhouse a portal to hell, of course, which they loved. And then,
Which they loved, of course.
you know, it's like, oh yeah, it could be a portal to hell. Yeah. And so now the dollhouse opens up and terrible goblins dressed, you know, people dressed as goblins. And it was a terrible, terrible sequel. It was like Amityville's not 7 or something. But,
so you
but
had,
I mean, but restrictions, you know, that's part of what we figure stuff out. We always do.
Okay, but translate that to, I mean, that was him giving you you can't have this, you can't have this, you can't have this, you can't have this. Whether it was a studio or the one guy telling you that. I mean, fast forward until now, you've got some clout, you're running shows. What are the kind of restrictions now? Are they cultural? Have they changed for you though in your progression? Like, are you having as many executive restrictions, creative
They're
restrictions?
the same. They're just bigger and bigger scope. They're always the same. You want more money for actors, you don't have enough money. You want more days to shoot, you don't have enough days to shoot. You got to get very creative as a filmmaker. You always try to have to solve your own problems. I always think that the best directors are also producers. The best writers are also producers. You know, you have to be open to resetting something in a place where it has to be here, but no, it's not going to be. It has to be in a stadium, but can it be? Okay, can't be in a stadium. Can it be in a high school auditorium? You know, yeah, it could be. Would it be as great? No. But I mean, you also have to make a judgment as to what's important. And you always have to remember what's important are the actors. They are selling your ideas. And if you miscast or if you do something, that's one thing. But whatever you do, it's right here. It's all in the emotion of the characters for most things. That even includes action films. That includes whatever genre you are in. Because when you write the blocks of and the car goes through the parking lot up to the top of the structure and flies through the rail onto the roof of the next building, right? You could write that. What you want to know is that the characters are solid enough. People have read a lot of action. What people want to have is a story that's fresh, characters that are interesting within the story that's fresh, a juxtaposition of ideas that make it something new. And these are things you have to play with.
Wonderful. I got someone in here, New Mexico, asking, how can people adapt to this new climate that we're in? Let's take that from someone not quite in your position. Say it's someone starting out. Maybe they don't have a lot of contacts yet. Maybe they are. It's just them in their room. Is there anything they should be doing differently? Let's say that for writing, directing, and acting.
Doing differently than sitting in their room, you mean?
How can people without the kind of clout or industry references stay relevant in the new climate?
If you're a writer, the WGA has a section of their website that lists producers, right? Some people don't take it. Some people take unsolicited scripts. Some people don't. There are agents. Some of them do take unsolicited. Some don't. If you've got to do the work, you've got to send out dozens and dozens of scripts. If you're starting off, you've got to try to get someone's attention. It seems daunting and impossible, but everyone who's ever made it has had someone read their thing and seen their acting reel and all the things that we do, right? That we, there are always ways to get someone to see and to read. I know if you're sitting in a town in New Mexico, or you're in ABQ, or you're somewhere and you think, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
How am I going to get anyone to see this idea? I always think you should always take a screenwriting course. Even if you've written a screenplay before, I think taking a course is very important. Taking an online course is important. I think putting yourself into positions where you can meet somebody, like I'm talking today, other people are talking. I don't think it would have taken that hard to find out that this event is going on and then to be part of this. Sometimes people set up their own obstacles. But the one thing you have to know is you're getting involved in an industry that is self-motivated. You have got to sit and write every day. Do you know if you wrote one page every day, you'd have a script in 2 to 3 months, an entire script, and all it took was one page. And you can't say to somebody that writing a page, which will take you a total of 20 minutes to an hour a day at the most, is impossible. So, you know, everything from when you start writing to when you're trying to promote yourself is self-motivated, which is very uncomfortable for a lot of people, which is why people get agents, but you have to get an agent, so you have to start off being self-promoting. So a lot of it is just being bold. And I also think, if you're wanting to know the truth, is finding a killer cover letter or email caption, something that's easy and short, and this is my story, and this is why this is important, and I would love to take a look at it.
Yeah, that I mean, explain if you can for maybe those who are starting out how important representation is, especially at a time like this when.
Well, representation is everything. You need an agent.
Is there a time when someone knows that they're ready for that? Or are you suggesting one script and go get them? I mean,
no. Okay, so what I would suggest is you have to have a minimum of 2 scripts that you really love and that you think and have gotten positive reviews from the people in your world. I personally would also try to get some notes from one of these services because I actually think they've been very helpful for people. But having said that, that does cost, so that can't be for everybody. But, you know, if it's $75, then just think about where that money is being spent in your life. But having said that, the good thing about them is that the legitimate ones have people who do it for a living, and they really are. I've known writers who have actually even do it because they want anonymous type stuff. They're pretty good. And second, you know, so you should have two spec scripts. If you're in TV, think of a pilot that isn't necessarily a pilot that's going to get made, but a pilot that is interesting and noisy and crazy. Like I would, when you write a pilot, don't think about, oh, I'm going to see this on CBS tomorrow, because you're going to write something that's too safe if you do that. Huh. When you write a pilot for a TV show, write something insane. Like there's this guy who brought me a pilot that we're working on. I can't actually talk about it, but it was a new take on the Salem witch trials. It was crazy, right? Insane. And it was a great sample, but I'm like, let's make this a TV show. That will happen, but that's not your intention. Your intention is to write something that people just think, this is the nuttiest flippin' thing you have ever seen. These characters are crazy. Also write characters that are big, that have dimension, that have identifiably different characteristics than one another. They should read differently on the page. If I'm writing Graves, it's Nick Nolte, who's gruff, and then his wife is Patricia, and she's almost British, you know. And then the kid is the kid Isaiah was kind of a New York Jewish kid. It's like create characters that are very well defined and different than each other, and they leap off the page. And really think about the voices of the characters. What I suggest is that you find an actor who you think embodies that character and really feel how the words would come out of their mouth. And then you're talking about this character and how are the words going to come out of her mouth based on the actor that you're thinking about and how they would express these sentiments. It'll help you find voice.
Would you say representation, I don't know where I'm trying to go with this representation thing. I mean, as you said, it's paramount to have something like that. Is there a certain caliber of representation that you should be going out for?
I don't think you should worry about the level. And there are, like in Los Angeles, there are managers and there's agents. You should go to both, managers especially. And there's like 200 of them. 200, I mean, like literally, you know. So I really, and also the WGA website has a lot of access to things. Also, the WGA website has a lot of seminars and access to webisodes, and they have producers places. And I really, you got to scattershot at the beginning, scattershot. Your script should be everywhere, every agency, every manager, every seminar, everything. But you shouldn't be taking your vacuum and going door to door and then that's all you're doing. You are also right, because if you've written it, then then last month's work is done, right? What's this month's work? Like, what's your next one? Because a lot of what they might say, and they will say 100% of the time, is, we love this. We really feel like the voice is amazing. We're not 100% sure. We would love to see your next one. I mean, what are you doing? What are you working on now? If you are not working on working on now, and I would almost say, like, you should almost be done with it, then that's a problem. You need to keep going in that period in your life where you say, and everyone has that period, this is the year I'm just going to do it, right? These are the 9 months. I'm going to work here, but I'm going to devote myself, whether you're an actor or a director or a writer. So if you're a writer, you should be writing your next one.
Most important industry advice for an amateur writer. Important tip or advice for an amateur writer. They made sure to say amateur.
Amateur writer.
So
is
what that means to you?
When they're right. The most important tip is to read.
You've given several.
Read as many screenplays that are the best screenplays that you can. My shelves used to be, I had Alien and Godfather and Goodfellas, and I had every script because it showed me everything. It was my education. I read everything. Now, in those days you couldn't, but now you can download these scripts. Read the scripts. Also, here's another tip, especially if you're young. Go onto Netflix and iTunes and educate yourself on film. A lot of people are not. Go on Google, literally write the 10 best films ever made and watch them all, even if you've never heard of them. Watch them all to the end. If they say Casablanca and you haven't watched Casablanca, that's the #1 film of all time, watch it. If it says Citizen Kane, watch it. Watch all those great films and try to figure out why they were great. Then read the scripts of the best films, and also read the scripts of films that you love. Like, read those screenplays. How did it lay out on the page? How was action described? How was the dialogue? It was always, I wrote a sci-fi movie and I freaking watched Predator and Alien. I read Predator and Alien. I still am educating myself on the page sometimes. I want to know, how does a writer translate this visual onto the page? Now my life is about less words, right? Because when you start writing, you tend to write too much, you overwrite. But like, read screenplays. And a lot of the beginning of an amateur's life is mimicry, and you're mimicking. I mean, it's the same thing about a singer. The Rolling Stones and the Beatles all started off doing like rockabilly and and blues renditions when they started off when they were 18 or 19. Then they got into their own stuff, right? When you start off, it's okay to mimic, but mimic the best. Don't mimic the worst. If you're gonna mimic, a drama, get the script to American Beauty, right? A family drama. See how that beautifully laid out on the page, and figure out your version of that. It's okay to emulate things, to find your style by learning from the ones who did it the best.
Wonderful. I'm going to get my last question here. Now, I know you're not primarily New Mexico, but we own a piece of you, Josh. We own a piece of you with Graves and Swing Vote. So this one's a little specific to New Mexico, but how can is there an opportunity for New Mexicans at this time to capitalize? I mean, right. Specifically New Mexicans. I mean, that's away from the industry. That's
well,
not
first of all, New Mexico is huge. I mean, all these studios are building places there. I
Yeah.
think Lionsgate is now, and I work for Lionsgate, and lots of places are. Write things you can shoot in New Mexico. Write things about New Mexico, and make yourself available to the crews and the film office there. Because I know when I worked on my movie, I was constantly in touch with people. You know, be a driver on a show. It's okay. A lot of the best people and writers and actors have been drivers on shows. If you know, be a PA on a TV show that's going up. Put yourself up for that. Work in the office. Because if you're working on The Office on a TV show, you're absorbing. Learn everything there is to do about you'll be surprised. You'll go in thinking, I want to be a writer. You'll spend, you know, one season on a TV show and think, no, actually, I'd love to be a script supervisor. That's a great gig. And you'll never not be working in New Mexico. Like, there's so many gigs that you could have. Open yourself up, not to just screenwriting, but to film. And what is the industry of film? What could it give you?
Right. Wonderful. Last question here. Jobs, the idea of reinvention. There's a scene in which Ashton Kutcher, who's playing Jobs, he's looking in the mirror, and he's just had this really big fight where he's not gonna acknowledge his child, and he's breaking up with his girlfriend, and he's looking in the mirror, and he's almost transforming from the young Jobs into this new person, tucking his shirt in. You know, he's had his shirt untucked this whole time. And he's tucking his shirt in, and he's looking in the mirror. Reinvention, and the whole movie's, you know, reinventing what they already know to create something special. Josh, how have you reinvented yourself in your career, and have you reinvented, and how have you reinvented yourself?
I think I'm constantly trying to reinvent, but reinvention is just a different way of saying, how are you going to challenge yourself? Because a challenge is something that's scary or new for you. You know, I mean, I have projects right now they're interesting, and they're reinventions only in that there's something new for me. You know, there's a space that I haven't worked in, or there's things that I really am passionate about. Whether I can get them made or not, I don't know. I think we need to keep challenging ourselves. You know, constantly challenge yourself. Try to find something that is interesting for you and new for you. And I'm working on a TV show right now that was very new for me, but I wanted to challenge myself and work on a show that was more kind of network with another EP who's worked and been has done a lot of work in network TV, which was new for me. Like, I was never a network TV guy ever. I still really am not, but I am fascinated with the process of network TV. How does that work? You know, I'm open to that now. You know, still, I would love to, the shows that I'm working on, I'm still, you know, you still want it to be on a Netflix or a streamer, because that's how, because of the freedom it gives you. But network TV is its own genre. And so be open to all genres that are available to you, and be curious about them, because they're lucrative and they're just another way for you to express yourself.
All right, everyone. If you're going to be, you know, eager, do it with openness. Challenge yourself. Put in the work when designing your project, and tell the stories that you feel impassioned to tell. I think there's a lot of great stuff there, Josh. So thank you for going in depth on that.
Thank you.
Well, we hope you're back. We hope you're back in New Mexico sometime. You know, again, we have a place waiting for you if that's the case. Thank you for coming a part of Albuquerque Film and Music Experience.
Thank you, Andy.
We hope to have you again sometime, and
thank you.
And we're looking forward to seeing what's coming next. So
great.
Thank you for
appreciate
tuning
it.
in,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks for the questions. Josh, go get them.
Thank you.